Hello and welcome to another edition of MOB Public Forum video podcast. Today we are speaking with a candidate for Vienna City Council, Jim Leach, who is an incumbent. As with our primary interviews, we sent out invites to all candidates by email and a few by phone. We're excited today to have Jim Leach joining us. He is an incumbent who is running for re-election for council. Welcome.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning.
Let's dive right in. Give us your best 1-minute introduction. Who is Jim Leach?
Well, Jennifer, my family's been from West Virginia since the late 1700s, and probably a lot of the way that I define myself is from the sense of community and history that I have in West Virginia. I was born in Parkersburg, but my wife of 34 years grew up in Vienna, and so for the last 27 years I've lived in Vienna. I found it a great community, and I've been able to build family, career, community, all in that context. And so that's really what defines me is I'm pretty much a homebody, and don't travel much. Staycations define me, so I'm here for the long term.
Okay. Well, what made you decide to run for re-election? I know, running for election to begin with is a hurdle, but clearly you've been there. You've decided you want to stick it out.
Well, I was encouraged to run for a second term. First of all, I have a little bit of unfinished business, which I'm sure we'll get to. But, I think it's just from a sense of being blessed. I absolutely believe in the principle of goes around, comes around. With my family, with my career, with the people that I've met. I was involved in coaching youth sports in Vienna for about 15 years, and I found that very rewarding. So I think just an attitude of reciprocity and abundance always brings back good things. And I think the only way that happens is to treat others as you'd like to be treated, and to share as best you can your good fortune.
As an incumbent, how well do you think the city does in interacting with constituents?
I think when you talk about the city, our city is run on a day-by-day basis by our mayor, our department heads, and our city employees. By and large, we have a very long tenure with a lot of those folks. I think they are fantastic ambassadors, and they handle the day in, day out. And all the time that I've been in office, I'm always impressed with the kind of response that people get to their issues. They don't always get the answers that they want, depending on what the issue is. But their issues are always taken seriously, acted upon promptly, and resolved if possible. So, I think that's really where it starts, is with our city administration and department heads of, as I say, probably the average tenure of our department heads is decades. And I think that core strength is what really defines and makes Vienna one of the top cities in West Virginia now for decades.
So what would you see as the 3 largest problems facing Vienna today?
I don't know that Vienna has large problems compared to a lot of places of which we're familiar. We have a quiet, peaceful, safe, protected community, both with respect to our police force, our outstanding fire department, which is a volunteer fire department. The quality of our infrastructure, of course, is challenged. All infrastructures age. And so those concerns are long-term concerns. But I think the 3 issues that I would point to would be, number 1, the completion of the Manville volunteer remediation program so that we can get that property available for development. And as a kind of a correlation to that would be also continuing to redevelop kind of downtown Vienna proper. We see the development that's going on at the mall now with the 4 new box stores, which is good news for us, especially in the modern age of Amazon, and continued investment in our community. Of course, stormwater, just like I put you off a half an hour this morning because of this rain event that we had, and I had an open roof that I had to attend to, and I appreciate your understanding on that. But, we're seeing these increasing in particular, climate events, but in particular, stormwater in Vienna. We're limited to Pond Creek or Pond Run in terms of our primary watershed. The people say, well, what can we do about that? And you have to understand that that watershed is within the purview of the state. It'll be a combination of the Department of Natural Resources and the DEP. And we hit capacity often. It doesn't matter how big of a storm drain you have. If there's nowhere for that storm water to go, it's going to stay in that drain. There's stormwater detention systems and different things that can be done, but those are expensive and take time to pursue. So I think the stormwater is a big issue. The development of Manville, and then I think just staying the course with responsible management of the city's resources. Vienna is very financially sound and has been for a long time, and staying within our means, continuing to try to increase our general fund at the end of each budget year, which we do. So that would be my answer.
Sounds like you may have answered this as well. If you're reelected, what's the main issue that you want to see dealt with?
Well, of course, right. And Jennifer, anybody that paid any attention when I ran the first time around knows that Manville was my primary focus. That is a long, arduous, and expensive process. In fact, tomorrow, I'm expecting to receive the certificate of completion report to submit to the DEP for the Riverside parcel, which is at 17 acres on the west side of River Road. And I am pushing as hard as I can, and I know the mayor is just as committed to get us that same final report submitted in 2020 for the production side. Anybody that's aware of what's going on with this, one of the wrinkle that came up most recently is that when Manville was there, you have electrical transformers, and up to 1979, those were lubricated with what are called PCBs. And occasionally when a transformer fails, there can be some spills, and we kind of got blindsided with that. The levels are not horrible, but of course it needs addressed, and it added a whole new plank to the project. So we've been through that testing. We've submitted both to the DEP and to the United States EPA a report outlining our plan for remediation for the PCBs. And we are, I feel, back on track to getting that remedial action plan approved, which will in essence be capping those sites and placing land use covenants so that any future development will be aware, have those areas identified so they can deal with them appropriately. So that's getting that to conclusion is certainly my primary goal. But all of the things that I've learned while being on city council, all the other issues that have come up, also will continue to be focused on a little bit of what I mentioned a little bit, the stormwater is an emerging or continuing issue really. And so of course that's going to be one as well.
Sure. Well, some of the worst partisan battles in our history have happened in the recent past. While Vienna city government is nonpartisan, how do you feel about your ability to compromise and work together with people of different backgrounds and mindsets?
I've run in a couple of partisan campaigns, and I love nonpartisan, because I'm not strictly, I'm a registered Democrat, but, values from both political parties are important to me. I agree and disagree with certain planks in both political parties, so I prefer nonpartisan. And I think the most important thing, first of all, is to do your homework and be prepared. So to understand the issue, to do the research and know consequences, both intended and unintended with respect to that. And then the other thing is to stay positive. One of the things that's most frustrating to me is when I see a constant negative, critical approach to problems without really any real action. You got to get up and go to work. And if you choose an issue, then you have to take into consideration everybody's point of view. Use your own independent judgment based on your own independent research, and realize that you're just one vote, all right? I don't decide. There's no king in Vienna. And so realizing that, and also, of course, we're restricted by quorum rules. We can't gather and discuss things outside the public purview. So, and then try to be, again, positive. And I can't say that sometimes they don't occasionally get my goat, all right? But again, I think that really is where it starts and ends, is that realizing that it's hard work, it's informed decisions, and it's accepting the outcome of a vote and moving on to the next issue. Becoming bitter or harping or refusing to let something go because it didn't go your way is absolutely counterproductive to the city.
Well, how do you see the job of Vienna City Council person changing in the current and hopefully soon to be past post-COVID-19 world?
You know, the COVID-19 world, both for me personally, as well as for the city of Vienna, has not had anywhere near the kind of impact that it has in many areas of the country. You know, for me personally, I'm a small business person, have a lot of control over the issues of social distancing and so on. I'm not trying to manage, you know, hundreds of people coming and going. But with respect to the city, I think that the city has weathered this pandemic very well. And it's not because of any immediate decision that's been made, but based on decades of preparation. You know, our city has been well run for a long time. Our police and fire departments are well equipped, well funded. Our emergency preparedness plans are in place. And we're also financially sound. I mean, we're fiscally and socially responsible. The impacts on the mall and in terms of, and all of the retail, in particular restaurants and so forth, you know, I know that's had a major impact on folks. But for the city's part, we've been able to deal with, you know, less revenues and looking at scaling back capital expenditures that maybe we would have otherwise done. And again, this goes to the strength of our administration, our department heads, our mayor, who have done the forward-looking thinking that's necessary to weather this, and hopefully, you know, soon to be done. Of course, they're talking about a vaccine perhaps now being released. So in the grand scheme of things, Vienna's weathered it very well, and I think that that again is not just based on a snap decision anyone's made, but it's based on Vienna being a very well-run city and able to cope with these types of issues as they arise.
What would you say are your personal core values? Not Jim the candidate, Jim the man.
Well, you know, I've raised 4 children with my wife, Joanna, of 34 years. By no means perfect, and anyone that knows me well would be happy to share with you why that's true. But all of my children have been raised in West Virginia, all attended West Virginia University, and graduated. 2 of my children are attorneys. I have an engineer. My other daughter has, you know, given us 2 grandchildren. Everybody's in West Virginia. And to me, I'm very proud of that. That's always been the hallmark of creating opportunity to keep our young people, to keep our families here. West Virginia is one of the most beautiful states in the country and has a lot to offer. And, you know, when I ran for Senate in whenever it was, 2016, you know, my concern was the way that our natural resources were exploited. I went back to law school and got a master's in energy law in 2014-15. I actually was a full-time law student with my son, Morgan, while he was in law school. So I think, you know, that the sense of family, community, as I mentioned, you know, I'm a homebody. I don't even have a passport. You know, my life and goals and just my center is here. And so those core values are centered around setting goals, achieving them. Anyone that knows me knows I've got a lot of irons in the fire. You know, I'm a general contractor. I'm a licensed attorney. You know, Vienna City Council person. You know, we build wrecked Subarus, and we've got 5 guys working full time and doing that. And the jury's out on how that will do, but we build a quality product and take pride in what we do. And so I think those are core values. I tell my kids, you know, good things happen when you get up and go to work. So get up and go to work.
Well, as City Council person of Vienna, you have been and would continue to be a visible ambassador. You probably touched on this a little bit as well, but tell us what you would say to someone, you know, from another city when they ask you what you're most proud of about your town.
In my 2nd year on council, the mayor appointed me as the chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee. And when that occurred, I kind of went through and we had the Manville budget, which is a sizable expenditure by the city to try to redevelop and take control. Realize Manville is 35 acres in the heart of Vienna. It was a catastrophe when Structural Resources had that in the voluntary remediation program. I hold both that company and also the West Virginia DEP somewhat accountable for allowing the kind of expense that the city had to absorb. But I felt like we had to get in control of that situation because that is just such a critical part and in the heart of Vienna. So as an ambassador for the city, the other thing, as I did this research, both with respect to budget items with Manville, historically and virtually universally, Vienna is rated as one of the top cities in West Virginia, top 5, top 3 for quality of life in West Virginia. All of the things we've been talking about this morning go into that. I think that people that live in Vienna feel safe. They like that their lights come on, their toilets flush, that we do the best we can. Our public works department responds immediately, our fire department, our police department. If you have an issue come up in Vienna, you get action. And I think that while there are always detractors, I think the vast number of the somewhat 11,000 people who live in Vienna would say that the quality of life here speaks for itself, that this is a great place to live, and for all the reasons we've been talking about this morning. And so, and again, I give just so much credit to the city employees that really make that happen. It's from the department heads to the guy that gets up, you don't realize, 3 in the morning and water line breaks, somebody's getting out of bed, and they do. And so I think those are the kinds of things that speak highly of the city. It's not any one person, it's a team effort. And I'm pretty proud to be a part of it.
With that, we'll move into the rapid fire hot seat section. These are these are questions that I actually sourced from residents of Vienna. When I moved to the area, my family and I moved into a home in Vienna and lived there for 2 years before we eventually bought our home now in Parkersburg. So I reached out to some friends, my mom friends, and said, hey, what are you guys looking at issue-wise in Vienna? And so these are the top vote getters from that investigation. You've talked a little bit about budgetary things. How is the city's financial situation, especially with the added complication that COVID-19 has brought?
Well, I talked about that at some length a few minutes ago, but the city's financial situation is very solid. When we had one of the big issues in my first term was the increase in the enterprise fund for water and sewer. Everybody thought it was a massive increase, but when you actually looked, and it's on my Vienna City Council page, you'll see a breakdown of just what that actually entailed, what the actual dollar amounts were. So that was a hot issue. And yet I felt very comfortable after I did my homework that it was in the best interest of the city of Vienna. You can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want these services, we have to invest in those. I don't remember the number of years, 13 years since Vienna had a water and sewer rate hike increase. But, so that's, just issues like that, I think, being dealt with. But Vienna's financially sound. And again, that didn't occur overnight. It did not incur, some people call the windfall of home rule, but it's been, again, we have 3 council people and a recorder that have served the city for decades. And IBM says, past performance is the best indicator of future behavior, okay? And that record's undeniable. The same with the mayor, the same with, Amy Roberts, our finance director. These people have been in the trenches doing these jobs for decades, and the fruits of their labor are evident in what I guess I would call our balance sheet. Vienna is financially sound.
C8 water issues and the long-term filtration project. I know there's an agreement in place with a company. They installed the filtration system. A concern that I heard was, what about when that agreement ends, or when that company feels like they've reached, the peak or the end of their filtration part of the project? Is the city prepared to take that on? Is there a long-term plan to make that continue?
Well, this is another thing my kids will tell you, my sayings and phrases that they're so tired of. But, one of the things I tell them is life is about maintenance, all right? Chemours has agreed, and one of the the big events that happened in this past term on city council and within the city of Vienna, wells 7 and 8, which are down around Manville and Jimmy Harper's property, were taken offline because they were not incorporated in the first 2 rounds of the carbon filtration system that were funded by DuPont and then Chemours. But now, if you've noticed, they've now put the carbon filtration right there in the corner of River Road and 32nd Street, right on the corner of the Manville property. Wells 7 and 8 are back online. And that was a major concern because, you know, if you remember, at one point we were getting water from Vienna and we were handing out bottled water to citizens. And we were concerned that if we had another disruption with 7 and 8 offline, our existing infrastructure water system would not be able to meet the demand. That's all been taken care of. You know, the carbon filtration, and of course we are now, on my most recent recollection, we're at a non-detect in any of our water samples for C8 in Vienna. But I mentioned earlier, intended and unintended consequences. That carbon filtration system does more than just filter C8, all right? It improves generally and overall the quality of water that's delivered to the citizens of Vienna. You know, I'm not aware of any termination clause or end responsibility for Chemours in maintaining these systems. It may be there. I didn't make done the homework on that, all right? But I know that again, past performance being the best indicator, that planning ahead, keeping those systems up and maintained. Of course, as technology improves, we see things downsize. It may be that it will, in the future, will be less expensive, more manageable to keep that water clean. You know, we've got, you know, so I think that's, you know, the problem is, I won't say resolved, but under control, well managed. Our water supply is safe. Forward-thinking leaders into the decades, I would think, at the minimum, to come. Just have to keep an eye and make sure that if at some point it does become the city's responsibility, which I'm not aware that it would in any definable timeline, that we are prepared to continue to provide that as another service to the citizens of Vienna.
What about making Vienna a more welcoming and inclusive place for all current and future residents? This question came about because I know a few weeks ago, some residents took issue with the way the flag ceremony at Spencer Landing was dealt with. The question that I heard most often was they were concerned that it might put off some people who don't subscribe to a certain belief system. And actually, Vienna has one of the most diverse populations in the state, just because of the folk who have moved in for different job opportunities. And so that was a question that that was raised.
Well, you know, any question like that always starts with your personal viewpoint. And the way that I measure people is by that person's conduct. My mother raised me and 4 sisters by herself, and she set a lot of those values. You know, you judge people based on how they behave individually. And then we have our society's mores, okay? We have the values that define America, all of the turbulence that we've had. You know, you can't please all of the people all of the time. And sometimes people's criticisms are valid. Sometimes, at least in my view, they're somewhat unreasonable. We see, you know, with the advent of Facebook and social media and the immediate transmission of ideas, and sometimes things that people would actually like to take back a few minutes after they say them. But it's too late because of the immediate gratification of that publication. You know, that tolerance and respect and holding your tongue, counting to 10 maybe before you just volunteer a response. But as far as the city of Vienna and inclusiveness, you know, I believe that the leadership of the city, the employees of the city, you know, all reflect an attitude of inclusiveness and tolerance, and, you know, and a belief that we are citizens of Vienna, all right? And so that is a touchstone in and of itself that should unite us. And so you can't stop some people from being offended, and perhaps rightly so, perhaps not so much. But you've got to measure your response. You know, every time that you got to figure that when you hear something, a stimulus, okay, well then there inevitably is a response, but you get to decide to pause in between to reflect on what an appropriate response would be, and perhaps people should take a little more time in between that stimulus and response, you know, to think it through. And I think when people do that, a lot of this goes away. And so it's the society we live in a lot of respects. And again, that's just what I say, that in West Virginia, in Vienna, we are pretty blessed with a kind of a peaceful, laid back, quiet lifestyle in a lot of ways, that I certainly would not choose to give up to move to a big city or to, and I just, you know, we get to choose our lives, and we get to choose where to live them. And for my part, the life I've chosen and the place I've chosen to live it is just fine with me, and because of the quality of people around me and the values that I believe a lot of us share.
So you touched on this as well. You can add anything if you think you've missed anything. Street flooding is a major concern for, you know, more people than we'd like in the city of Vienna, and Parkersburg as well. So I know that that's not an easy fix. It's probably more of a long-term planning, infrastructure-wise project.
Well, yeah, and as I mentioned or alluded to, I told you that I had I'm trying to rehab the old Goldsmith Black warehouse, and I've really been working on that hard the last 2 years. The roof system is where it starts. And I've got about 5,000 square feet of that roof torn off right now, and you saw the rain event that we had this morning. And literally, I'm concerned about it coming through the roof, and all of a sudden the floor drains start gushing. And literally I had a full 5-gallon bucket that weighed about 50 pounds. I sat on it over top of the drain about this big around, and it moved me off of it. So that's, you know, so that we're all dealing with this increased stormwater. You know, and you know, the technology that exists, again, you have to detain stormwater and release it gradually. You know, and that's in essence, again, the function of pond run, right? That's our main, and also I have property along the Ohio River, and I have a stormwater easement off of Grand Central that comes down roaring through my property. And, you know, and periodically, I suppose I could call the city, but I don't. I try to dredge that a little bit and keep the vegetation out of it and keep that water moving. Not just so it doesn't back up on me, but so that it goes off of Grand Central, right? It has to have somewhere to go. So I think stormwater detention is huge. And of course, we've got an aging infrastructure. You know, we've got a lot of clay pipe in the ground, storm lines. We've got a lot of, and one thing that is important is we also, you know, have what drains into the stormwater system is very important. And in the decades past, there's not always been the attention, does this drainage belong in this ditch, in this pipe? And the city has gradually been trying to correct that as they've been identified, doing dye tests. But you're right, it is a long-term problem. It's a problem that's going to have to be worked out in conjunction with state, perhaps even federal authorities in terms of, like I said, the watersheds. You know, we had recent conversations at City Council. Folks came with, you know, personal watersheds. You know, Vienna is topography is very hilly. We have a lot of places that water comes from and drains to. And when you're at the bottom of one of those watersheds and you get an event like we had this morning, you're going to get water. And some of that comes from private property, you know, which is not technically the city's responsibility, but once it gets to the city streets, trying to address that. And you're right. And then I'll revisit, you know, our public works department, you know, the efforts that they make to drive forward thinking. You know, we talk about 5- and 10-year plans for infrastructure, the funding for those, having the equipment for those. And, you know, it goes back to cake and eat it. I mean, I'm kind of going on this one, but it's important. You know, having the equipment, you know, we you know, having a jetter, we've had to replace that, having the tools, the equipment, the training, the certifications, right? Because not anybody can just design, you know, these, and then we have to work with that, you know, outside engineering firms and all of that. And it is a big commitment, and it is going to take a long time. And we also have to understand that, you know, that at least my personal belief and a part of my education, you know, in getting a master's in energy law had a lot to do with studying the effects of climate change and what we're seeing, you know, as a result of some of those things. Some people dismiss that, other people, you know, take it very seriously. I mean, but all that goes into the mix. But I think that the developing stormwater detention and dispersal systems, as we have this increase in water, is going to be central to the approach to improve the problem. I don't know there's ever like a solve, but to make it better.
Sure. So I know alternate forms of transportation have also been a topic of conversation of late with Vienna City Council.
Sure.
I had some people ask about the addition of bike lanes or trails for people who want to use other forms of transportation.
And we also recently, if you're probably aware, the golf course ordinance just passed with some opposition, a lot, you know, and Bruce Rogers talked about this a lot, and so did Roger Bibby, about the number of their constituents that came forward in support of it. We have 2 golf courses in Vienna. We're blessed, even though we have a lot of hilly terrain in our watershed, we have a lot of flat, level, wide streets, the back streets. You know, they're all amenable to those uses, both walking, riding bikes. You see, you know, especially throughout COVID, you know, the mayor's even commented on just how many people are out taking a walk. All right. So we have that. The other thing, you know, is when you talk about the bike trail, you know, we've seen a development, a lot of the, you know, the rail trails. And I know for my part, I've probably got, you know, the Goldsmith Black property, the railroad runs through it. And I would not have any problem, you know, I'll go on the record now saying, I don't have any problem, you know, giving easements across any property that I have. And it's that kind of cooperation that increases that. But I think, you know, and as a society, we are changing. You know, we had the, you know, the issue with the Parkersburg City Council and the recent ban, and then the passage of our golf cart ordinance. And my concern about the golf cart ordinance, I would not support it when it reached all the way down to the mall or the Walmart Applebee's crossing. I thought that was a bridge too far. There's just too much congestion traffic. Also, we've already got people with, you know, disabilities and so on needing to get across there, and I didn't want to confuse that. And maybe over time, as we see that people are doing it responsibly, we can revisit it. But I think that again, just like in so many other areas, Vienna is very blessed with a community that's conducive to these types of activities, that we can safely, particularly, you know, in the side streets in Upper Vienna, use these alternative forms of transportation, that you can safely take your child out and teach them how to ride a bike, you know, on a city street in Vienna. And that our police department does very well at, you know, at keeping an eye on things, and you know, they're not overbearing, and yet you know, they're there and available to keep our streets safe for these uses. And so you know, that would not be an area that I would identify as a big problem for you, and it's in fact I think one of our blessings.
Well, that we've come to the end. This is where we give you the space and time to hit anything you think we've missed, tell voters how to get in touch with you, get a yard sign, get involved, etc.
Well, you know, I've spent 4 years on Vienna Council, and I try to keep information up on my Vienna City Council page. I'm not seeking contributions for re-election. I don't particularly am a big fan of yard signs anyway. So I do a few. I'm always available. My cell phone is published on the Vienna City Council page if anyone wants to contact me. You know, so, you know, I view the service on Vienna City Council, and it's where you start. It's a nonpartisan seat, and I love that about it. I don't need to be concerned about whether, you know, this party or that party, you know, has particular support or opposition. It's really what's best for our community. And so in that term, I don't see it as a political office. I see it as an office for public service. I've explained my reasons that I think public service is important, because I think the reward is as great as the sacrifice that you make in doing it. You know, the only thing I don't like about it, I get up early and I go to bed early. So when city council meetings start at 7 p.m., I'm yawning a little bit. But you know, aside from that, I think that I've truly benefited, you know, more than it has cost me to serve as a public servant in Vienna. And that's the spirit that I want to continue to move forward, perhaps do another term. You know, and again, I really would give a shout out to actually those who have served for decades and proven the worth of their insight. You know, because again, there's things that are within the business as being a city council person and things that are not. And so the broader political world doesn't necessarily belong in Vienna City Council chambers. We want quality of life for our citizens, for our employees that work for the city, for the employees that work for other companies within the city of Vienna, address the issues of, you know, my toilet doesn't flush and so on. And, you know, so it's kind of a grassroots type of public service, I think, in serving Vienna, because we're really trying to serve people that we do know and that you do have an opportunity to meet and reach out to. It's you know, it's a very small circle of influence that you have in Vienna. And that's the way that I like to keep it. I like to keep it nonpartisan. I like to keep it focused on what benefits our community, balanced, you know, with what's achievable, what's financially responsible. And, you know, and if the citizens want to send me back for another term, I'm happy to do it. If they want to make a different choice, I'm happy to accept that.
Well, we appreciate your time and your service to the city. Good luck with your candidacy. We hope you and everyone else stay safe and well, and everyone wash your hands.
All right, Jennifer, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.